Let's start. According to the poet here. So according to the poet, he is not worthy of the resemblance. And the reason being, he has never led the same life about which he writes. Okay, means there is a lot of difference between whatever he writes and the way he lives. So that is why he said that means when he writes about the things where you can say very kind things, very great things, but whatever life he leads, that is not at all similar. Means he has dreams, but first thing, he is not able to convert those dreams into reality. First thing, and he says that sometimes he even doesn't believe in his own thoughts. Okay, so he said that he is not worthy of that thing. Now what happened? Who will read? The poet spoke sadly here, and who is going to read this? Again, Bani only. What about others? Yes, Bani, start.
The poet spoke sadly, and his eyes were wet with tears. So too were those of Ernest. At the hour of sunset, as had long been his custom, Ernest was to speak to a group of neighbors in the open air. Together he and the poet went to the meeting place arm in arm. From there could be seen the great stone face. Ernest threw a look of
Now the poet spoke. Poet was sad, and there were tears in his eyes when he was saying these things to Ernest. As he that time he actually he's facing the reality of his life. It is the same thing. Sometimes we also do these things. These things, what we do, okay, few things that we don't follow, we are not able to do, and we ask others to do that thing. Okay, stop using these things, that is not good for you. And on the other hand, we, the one who is asking not to use the particular thing, is the one who continues to use that. So that time the poet, he was very sad. Then, as the routine suggests, so Ernest, he went to speak to a group of neighbors in the open air, and that time he took poet with him. Yes, Vani.
Ernest threw a look of familiar kindness around upon his audience. He began to speak to the people what was in his heart and mind. His words had power because they agreed with his thoughts, and his thoughts had reality and depth because they harmonized with the life which he had always lived. It was not merry breath that the picture uttered, they were the words of life. A life of God, deep and selfless love was melted into them. The poet, as he listened, felt that the life and character of Ernest were a noblest state of poetry that he had ever written. His eyes filled with tears, and he said to himself that never was so worthy a stretch as that mind's sweet, thoughtful face with the glory of white hair diffused about it.
Wait. Now, Ernest, he went there and he started speaking. And when he was speaking, the poet was amazed. Why was he amazed? Because Ernest's words, his thoughts were very wise. There was depth in his words. Okay, very deep thoughts, very deep words, and they were actually close to reality. Whatever he was saying, that was actually the reality, that was close to reality. And why so? Why there was reality and depth in his thoughts? Because they were in sync with the life which he had always lived. वो जो जिंदगी जी रहा था, means nothing fake. Whatever he was saying, That was the only thing he was doing. जो वो बोल रहा था वही चीजें वो कर रहा था. If he was saying that do not harm this thing, तो it means वो भी उस चीज को harm नहीं कर रहा था. So it means whatever he was saying, he was living that life, and that is why his thoughts were very pure. His thoughts were real, and there was depth in his thoughts. Okay, so the poet was amazed, and then he said that it was not just the thoughts. That is not the thing कि वो सिर्फ बोल ही रहा है. It was word. These were the words of life. जो भी बोल रहा था वो लाइफ की रियलिटी थी. Sorry. And then he said, a life of good deeds and selfless love. This is the life of Ernest. His life was of good deeds, selfless love. And then, as the poet was listening, he felt that life and character of Ernest were a nobler strain of poetry. Nobler strain of poetry means noble sound of poetry. So the life of Ernest, his wise thoughts, the reality of his life, his character, everything, these all things were good poetry. Okay, the kind of poetry he writes, जैसी poetry वो लिखता होता है, that type of life Ernest was living. Okay, and then his eyes, not that type, it was more than he had ever written. मतलब जितनी noble वो poets लिखी थी उसने, उससे भी ज़्यादा noble उसकी that poetry थी, life थी Ernest की. Now his eyes filled with tears, and he said to himself that never was there so worthy a sage as that mild sweet. Means his eyes, he was emotional that time. As he got a chance to meet a very thoughtful, sweet, mild, kind, gentle man in his life. He felt fortunate to meet such type of man in his life. Then, at a distance, but clearly to be seen, high up in the golden light of the setting sun was setting, okay? So appeared the great stone face, right? That face was always there. So with white mists around it, like the white hairs around the brow of Ernest. But this time, when the poet when the poet was looking at that great stone face, the mountain was covered with, you can say, white mist. Fog के साथ it was covered. So what it looked like? It resembled just the face of, you can say, Ernest. Ernest की भी white beard, and same way great stone face के भी they had that mist all around. So at that moment, Ernest's face took on an expression so grand that the poet was moved to throw his arms up and shout, "Behold, behold!" He started shouting, "Look, just see, Ernest is himself the likeness of the great stone face." So at the end, he said that just look, just see that great stone face and see the resemblance between that Ernest and the great stone face. Ernest himself was the great resemblance, look alike of that great stone face. And then why so? Why the poet said so? Because Ernest was thoughtful, he was noble, wise, and then he was the native of that valley. He was born there, and he was living the life that represented his thoughts. Okay, so everything was true. It was just like the prophecy, according to the prophecy. So he resembled the great stone face. The reason he admired, Ernest always admired the great stone face. He wanted to meet the man, same man, who resembled the face. Then, then all the people looked and saw that what the poet said was true. It was true. He was noble. He treated everyone equally, even the strangers also. Okay. And then the prophecy was fulfilled, but Ernest, having finished what he had to say, took the poet's arm and walked slowly homeward, still hoping that some wiser and better man than himself would by and by appear, bearing a resemblance to the great stone face. So everybody agreed that Ernest was the great stone face, but on the other hand, Ernest, he didn't believe and he wanted some other, he wished that someday some wiser and better man than him would come by and by appear one day. Okay, finally, by and by, this means finally or one day that would appear and it would resemble to the great stone face. So at the end, who was the great stone face? Who resembled to the great stone face? Jevant, I'll send you the message, okay? I'll send you the topic also and message everything. Yes, correct, Bani. It was Ernest, okay, who resembled that face. It was Ernest. And what was the reason? Reason was he was kind, noble, wise, thoughtful, very simple, good, kind-hearted, good-hearted man, and he was born in that valley. Okay, so it was Ernest. Let's start. True, false. Ernest's words reminded people of the wise old saying. Means his words were wise. Hurry up. True or false? True. True. Correct. It is true. It is true. Next. Total strangers from far away who visited Ernest in the valley found his face familiar. Did they? Yes, correct. It's false. Only Avni has given the answer. It's false. No. According to them, it was a common face, nothing special about that face. The great stone face confirmed Ernest's view that the poet could be worthy of its likeness. True? Is it true the great stone face confirmed this? False. Okay, those who are saying false, why so? Why do you think so? Because in the beginning, the stone, that great stone face was also taking interest. He was smiling, it was smiling. Yes, because the stone face just smiled and didn't answer, didn't say anything. It looked, okay, this is false, correct, this is false. When Ernest and the poet met, they respected and admired each other equally. True, this is true. Fourth is true and third is false. Fourth is true. They both admired each other equally. The poet along and later on the poet, he started admiring, you can say, or he started respecting Ernest more. So the poet along with Ernest addressed the inhabitants of the valley. Correct, Avni. It's false. Only Ernest did. Poet was there, but addressing part was done by Ernest. Fourth is true. Hardik, fourth, true. Last, the poet realized that Ernest's thoughts were far nobler than his own verses in his with or verses or poems. Okay, true. Correct. It is true. Next, the question answers. Okay. How was Ernest different from others in the valley? Please raise your hand. I'll unmute you or type your answer, whatever way you like. How was Ernest different from the people in the valley? Hurry up. How was he different? Okay, Ernest was unlike other commoners in the valley. He was a good, simple-hearted, noble, and thoughtful person. Correct. He had been under observation. Whose observation? He did not go with the crowd. He welcomed total strangers as the prophets. Okay. Gurnur, whose observation? किसकी observation के अंदर था वो? Ernest was kind, he was noble, man with unique thoughts in his mind and also looked like a great stone face. Bani, no need to write this line that he looked like great stone face because this was at the end they realized this thing. So because he was kind, he was noble, very simple, okay. He didn't want that fame, but still, he got famous, he got that fame. Otherwise, others, they are greedy for fame. So he wasn't greedy. He was simple, noble, thoughtful man. He truly believed in the prophecy and wanted and waiting to meet the man who resembled to the great stone face. So he was different because of his character. Qualities. His qualities made him different. Why did Ernest think the poet was like the stone face? Why did Ernest think the poet was like the great stone face? Yes, hurry up. We have to finish the question answers today. Hurry up, hurry up. Why did Ernest think? Because his poems were very noble, okay, they depicted the song of life. On reading these poems, Ernest could hear the distant voice of heavenly song. Correct, Avni? Ernest thought that the poet was like the great stone face as when he came, okay, the mountain smiled and was taking interest in their talks. This is also correct because he wrote such wise and noble words in his poem. Correct, Paramji. Now combine all these parts. First, because of his good poetry, the good, noble, you can say wise and noble words he wrote in his poems. Because of that, second, when he came, it looked like that the great stone face was taking special interest in him. Okay, so combine these answers. And one more thing, he was the native of that valley. He was born in that valley. You forgot this also that he celebrated he also wrote about, the poet also wrote about the stone face, the great stone face in his poetry. His poetry that was noble, wise, okay, deep. He had also celebrated the great stone face in his poems. And then when he came, the mountain that the great stone face took special interest. And then last, he was born in the valley. What did the poet himself say about his thoughts and poems? The poet said that he sometimes lacked faith in his own thoughts. Correct, Bani? Any other point? Any other point? Hurry up. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. The poet said that his life did not match his thoughts in the poems. Correct. Anme, he has written, enjoyed writing about Great Stone Face. So, yes, the poet said that his life and his thoughts, they did not match. He had dreams, but was not able to turn those dreams into reality. He lacked faith. Sometimes he lacked faith in himself and in his thoughts also. Okay. So that is why he said he wasn't worthy. Means you can write that he wasn't living the life that he wrote about. So he said that he wasn't worthy of the resemblance. And just check the way you are going to start. When he came to know that Ernest hoped or Ernest wished that he would resemble the great stone face, then he, with teary eyes, he said these things. Okay? Got it? Next, this part. Okay, what made the poet proclaim Ernest was the stone face? Proclaim means announce. What made the poet announce Ernest was the stone face? Yes, Vani. Anji Vani.
From a distance, but not clear to be seen, the poet saw that the great stone face with the white mist around it, like the white hairs around the brown of Ernest, had the moment Ernest's face took on an experience so grand that the poet was moved to thought that his arm up and shut, that Ernest was looking like a great stone face.
Okay, I got one more answer from Rohit. Ernest and the poet together went to a meeting place. Ernest addressed the gathering. His words had power and his thoughts had depth. They were the words of life, a life of good deeds and selfless love. Yes, and he was also living the life. You can say life according to his thoughts. Whatever there was harmony between his life and his thoughts. He was living the same life, and his thoughts, his life, they were pure, real, and deep. Okay, and at the end, the expressions. At the end, you will write about the expressions that resemble the features that resembled to that great stone face. Okay. First point we have to write born in that valley. Second, his wise thoughts and his life was totally similar, and then the resemblance. Okay, Abhi saying when the sun was setting, there was mist around the stone face which looked like the white beard and hair of Ernest. Then the poet found that his face exactly resembled to the great stone face. Also, Ernest was very noble and pure-hearted. Agni add these things also that there was harmony between his thoughts and his in his life. Got it? He was living the same life, nothing different. Is it okay? Next, this part we'll do later. Come to question number 6. Who by common consent turned out to be like the great stone face with the agreement of all? Who turned out to be like the great stone face? No, Hardik. Yes, who was the great stone face? Hurry up. Correct, Bunny. Correct. Ernest was like the great stone face. Correct, Tanushka. Yes, so it was by common consent. Ernest turned out to be like the great stone face. Okay. Now, if this question comes for 2 marks or 3 marks, you have to add why. Why people agreed. What was the reason that they gave their consent? So tell me that also. Why they agreed? Hurry up. Why they agreed? Why they gave their consent? Because, correct Anushka. Hurry up, others also, just type your answer. He was kind, humble, he belonged to that valley. Any other thing? Ernest was like that mountain because don't write mountain, write great stone, okay, Bani? Because he was the native of that village and was kind and noble, okay? He was kind and noble. He resembled, correct, Anvay, because of the resemblance and because of his real, pure, and deep life and thoughts, because of the harmony also. Okay, so you have to write this answer, means include everything about Ernest. Second part, did Ernest believe that the old prophecy had come true? What do you think? Did he believe? He looked very wise, gentle, and okay, yes, Akshima, this is correct. First part. Correct, Anvay, correct, Paramjit. No, he didn't believe that the old prophecy had come true. Yes, correct, Anvay. Correct. So, what did he say about it? No, Tanushka, don't write this in your notebook. No, ma'am, he did not believe. Just the answer is no, he did not believe. Okay? No, he didn't believe. And what did he say about it? What he said? What did he say? No, Ernest, Avni is saying this. No, Ernest believed that the prophecy had come true. He wished that no, Ernest didn't believe that the prophecy had come true. He wished that better man than him would by and by come, having the same resemblance. Correct. He was waiting. He had a hope. He hoped. He wished that someday a better man, better and noble man would come that would bear the resemblance to the great stone face. Got it? Correct? Because that's someone more better than, yes, Bunny, and write down would. Would come and that would be nobler. Question number 5, this you are not supposed to do in your fair notebook, for book only. Okay, Paramjit is saying, he said and thought that there might be some wiser and better man who would resemble the great stone face and fulfill the prophecy. Correct. Bunny, I got it. It's okay. I got it. I know it was, you have written man. Okay. There was a gap between his life and his words. Who said this? Whose statement is this? Poet. Correct. This statement is true for the poet. His words had the power of truth as they agreed with his thoughts. Correct, Akshima. Correct, Anushka. Bani, it's earnest. Earnest. Next is, his words were as soothing as a heavenly song, but only as useful as a vague dream. Correct. Those who have given all of you are giving the same answer. That's poet. The poet. His thoughts were worthy. His thoughts were worthy. See, this can be true for both the poet and the earnest, I think. Thoughts दोनों के worthy थे, right? Poet and earnest. Otherwise, earnest, he said this, na, that his thoughts, the poet's thoughts were worthy. So you can go for poet also. Whatever he said was truth itself. Fifth, earnest, earnest, earnest. Okay, correct. It's earnest. Earnest. His poems were noble. His poems were noble. This is poet. I think this is poet and very much clear. His life was nobler than all the poems. Correct, Akshima. Correct, Bhavika. Correct. It's earnest. Ernest's life. He lacked faith in his own thoughts. This is also clear. The poet, it's the poet. His thoughts had power as they agreed with the life he lived. Write down E and P, I'll understand. Yes, correct. Ernest. Ernest. Greatness lies in truth. Truth is best expressed in one's actions. He was truthful, therefore he was great. Who was great? Ernest. Correct, Avni. Correct, Tanushka. Correct, Bhavika. Ernest. Next is, that's all. Finished. Done. So if you have doubt, please ask. Any doubt? Any doubt? Sixth, unpaid sixth is poet. His poems were, whose poems were noble? It's poet, and you are asking seven. His life was nobler than all his poems. This is about Ernest. Ernest's life, the poet claimed this, right? The poet announced this, that his life was, Ernest's life was nobler than his poems. Fourth, Bani is, his thoughts were worthy. I think this can go for both. His thoughts were worthy. The thoughts of poet when he wrote, when it was about the poetry, that time the thoughts were worthy. Otherwise, Ernest's thoughts were also worthy. So you choose yourself. Write anything. Sixth question, first part, gather gold and or Kobe board. No, yes, but that time, their thoughts were not worthy. Gather gold and blood and thunder, right? Their thoughts were not true. Their thoughts were not wise. But Ernest's thoughts were wise. He was very kind-hearted. He was noble. Okay, so that is why he was similar. He resembled that. Is it okay? Okay, now I have to stop. Time is over. Bye. Take care.